Yeah.
Is this a good time to transition into the second part of Job, the second chapter?
Yes. Yes. So I feel
So,
like we beat that one and asked enough questions, and we'll revisit a lot of it later on, but
okay.
just to get it started. Yeah, let's go ahead and move on.
Okay. All right. And we can maybe edit this, and if I need to help you record stuff, I'm happy to. All right. So let's move on to the second chapter. So the second chapter is different. So right. So the accuser goes back to God, and he kind of goes to Annie. How do I? I'm trying to find a good quote. Let me see. So he talks about there's none on earth that are faithful, and then God's like, have you seen my servant Job? There is none like him. So Satan answers the Lord, and he goes, skin for skin, yes, all that a man has he will give for his life. He's like, but stretch out your hand now and touch his bone and flesh, and he will surely curse you to your face.
Hmm.
So God basically says, okay, I'll take that bet. He's like, behold, he's in your hands. His health, his physical body is in your hands, but spare his life. Right. So then Satan goes
Yeah.
out, and Job gets boils, which is something we don't talk about enough today. But they're pretty gross. They're
Yeah.
nasty. Um, oh, that's disgusting. There's a little detail in there about what he does with his boils. He scrapes them. It's disgusting. Oh, I didn't mean to read that. But anyway, he does all this. Sin did not. He basically says in all this, Job did not sin with his lips, and that's when his three friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, decide to show up and come around. But I want to point out this, that like his wife goes up to him and goes, "Do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die, you boiled monster." And he's like, "No." He's like, "You speak as one of the foolish women speaks." A little sexist, but fine. Shall we indeed accept good from God? And shall we not accept adversity? And in all this, God, Job did not sin with his lips. So that's kind of how it closes off before his friends roll up uh, to help him grieve not only his family loss, sans his wife,
Yeah.
but his gain of boils.
Yeah.
Now he has a different net benefit.
Right. Can I just say, as an aside, I always thought this was pretty funny. And I would say this when I was single too. So this is not a reflection on my marriage. I find it funny that the accuser took everything away from Job, like all of his family, all of his cattle, all of his wealth, except for his wife. And I can't tell if that was an act of mercy or if that was to aid in the suffering, like 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 just to increase the suffering. I don't know. It's just
Ashley,
a
if
fun
you're,
aside. But that's like the only interaction she has in the whole story. It's just funny
yeah,
to me.
just curse God and die. He's like, nah.
And scene. She's gone.
Yeah. She's gone. This character actor just had a cameo in the film. Anyway,
Yeah. I know
Ben,
that's
can
not the
I?
point, but
No. One thing that I noticed about this though is that when the ante's up, not Job's already like, remember, he didn't gain anything back.
mm,
Say the accuser basically goes up and he's like, "Hey, fine. Maybe it's not about prosperity. People can be themselves and lose a lot, but when it comes to their physical bodies, when it comes to themselves individually, that that's when that
mm,
they'll curse you. That's when they lose their faithfulness." So Ben, I wanna see if you can kind of open up for us a little bit what that might mean. What questions do you think that they're getting at
yeah,
here? What do they want us to think about?
yeah, because it does seem related to the first, right?
It
The
does.
first question is, are people righteous only because they get something from it? This question really seems more on the lines of people are righteous only because it's only because they're in a comfortable position, right? Because that question deals more with not our relationship or what happens when we're righteous. It has to deal with sort of our external influences, right? Like, well, people only go to church because, maybe they grew up in the church. That's just like the convenient, or not the convenient. That's like the habit, right? They go to church out of habit. Or, people only, worship God because it hasn't cost them anything, right? So they're comfortable. Um, yeah, that seems to be the question that's asked here for sure. Right. Job is only righteous because like he still has his life, he still has his health. Like, yeah, he lost a lot, but like he's still fine. So what happens to him? And so then we're brought to that question.
I think the comfort question is one of my favorite questions to think about because I think about it a lot, and I actually carry a little bit of this is just a personal confession, a little bit of guilt about it, and I think it's an interesting question to ask. I think when we read this, it really challenges us to kind of wrestle with this in a way we haven't wrestled with it before.
Hmm.
Um, man, I wonder if a comfortable Christianity is a good Christianity.
Hmm.
More to the point. I was once told, I don't know that this is true. I've not been able to find anything to back it up, but I've not been able to find anything to tell me that it's wrong. Someone once told me that people are more likely to be revered and want to do a highly like religious commitment where they feel like they're giving things up for the emotional release, and that it's a psychological placebo essentially that
Hmm.
makes us feel good about the things that we have. I don't know if that's true. So I kept thinking about comfort because I think that I actually really disagree with that statement, because I think a lot about how people like tend to just treat Christianity as one of the things that they are rather than like a core part of who they are, if that makes sense. I don't know that anybody can say that the faith is the totality of who they are, but that's a different
Like where
question.
it's compartmentalized.
Yeah, exactly. So like, yeah, man, I'm just gonna kind of say the stereotype without being mean, but I just want to say it. Like
Yeah.
the the upper middle class, upwardly mobile family who takes their kids to soccer's on Saturday, takes their kids to church on Sunday, goes to the nice school where they'll go into a nice college and live a nice life. And their parents are going to retire nicely and leave a nice little nest egg as the wedding gift for the kids that'll get married and have nice, comfortable lives and continue to beget niceness. And it's all nice and comfortable. And the Christianity doesn't really cost them anything. And yeah, they occasionally will take up a couple hours of their day to go do a missions project or maybe a week or two, and they'll donate to the church and they just go there and die. But at no point do they radically try to shift or do anything different to get out of this cycle of just suburban bliss. Does that make
Hmm.
sense? That's the obvious example to me. There's probably other ones, and there's patterns in my life where I echo that in different ways. And I think that's the interesting part about the question is when you think about it, like, man, tomorrow, if like, so let's just talk about the pandemic we just had. Like, what if I had COVID and I'd like, you know, had to go on a ventilator? Am I going to be like on this ventilator saying like, to to the nurses, no, I will not curse God and die, like, is that going to be a thing,
Hmm.
do you know what I mean though, Ben?
Yeah.
Like there's not a comfort there. It's like painful causing thing. Or if I lost a leg, would I be grateful that I lost the limb, um or am I okay that I lost the limb? Or if my life's hanging by a thread all the time and I'm like in constant discomfort because I'm covered in boils, like, am I going to
Yeah.
be like, yeah, God is good, or am I going to be like something else? And I think the idea is that like there's levels of comfort that we live with, and the question is, are we only faithful because we're in this nice protected fishbowl? Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Hmm. I mean,
Okay.
this is just like this is the thing about wisdom literature, and I think this is something to keep in mind whenever you're studying something. Like if you're reading through Psalms is a little different though. But like if you're reading through Proverbs or Ecclesiastes or like here with Job, like you kind of end up if you just read straight through it, you don't like you miss these things. Like these are significant questions that you know like you just reflect on so many different things. Like that's one of the benefits of wisdom literature, but I think it's also a little frustrating because like I'm sure some people
Mhm.
are wondering why is it taking them so long to go through Job. It's like, I mean, it'll pick up after this. Like these are the two fundamental questions that kick it off.
We're
Like that's the
literally
point of
setting
the
the table.
story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like this is the point of the story is to wrestle with these questions and like really take the time to do it because really how often do we ask these questions, right? Like
Never.
how often do we reflect on like am I a believer just because it's comfortable? I mean, that's worth reflecting on, right?
Yeah. Would I be a believer if I was afflicted with X, Y, or Z, or if I lived here, or if I, had this or didn't have that, or
Mhm.
whatever?
Yeah. So, all right, so let's play around with this a little bit. Oh, I'm not even used to ask this question. I don't even know where to go with
Yeah, well, it's a hard thought
it.
it's a hard thought exercise because, like, to be honest with you, like, it really is an individual thought exercise. Like, it truly
Hmm.
been like it's an individual thought exercise. So if you're comfortable with it, we could do an individual thought exercise for ourselves. to
Yeah.
illustrate the point.
Hmm.
Because like I don't, how else can we illustrate and like highlight for somebody else? Like for me, like, the question is like, my whole family grew up in the church and it's pretty nice. Like I benefit, or I'm comfortable and I'm sustained socially by having friends there, and it's nice to have that comfort and that security blanket. But like if I didn't have that to fall back on, where is my faithfulness? You know what I mean? Like what is it that I'm
Hmm.
thanking God for? How am I living in that? And I'm not trying to say like I what happened if God took away my community. That's not what I mean. But like there's a social to it. Like we go out to eat and get dinner and it's fun, it's comfortable.
Hmm.
It's like double date friends and it's awesome. And it's like yay. You know what I mean? Like, and it just
Yeah.
makes my life all that more charming. But like when I if I didn't have that, could I still have that same level of faithfulness if I just had a
Hmm.
more basic community? Does that make sense? That's a
Yeah.
really privileged way to put it, but like it's a question. Like it's a question for me that I ask.
Hmm.
And I think it's a fair question that I have to ask, right? Or like even then, like my father-in-law had his leg amputated. It was really hard on him. It was really, really hard on
Hmm.
him. Like it was like what phantom limb is, right? You start feeling it even though it's not there. Like it happened all the time. And he's had to relearn to walk. He's had to relearn how to drive his car, right? Because remember, you only have one foot to drive a car, but you still got to get in
Uh,
it. Like
hmm.
he can't go up and down stairs as easy as he could. He used to like to ride his bike, but he has to relearn how to do that. Like just all these little small things that you don't know about that are just part of your daily life, like, you know what I mean? Like he can't do anymore, right?
Hmm.
Like he has to get special seating at a movie theater.
Hmm.
Like that's the level of comfort that like you're blind to. And so I think about Job and like what am I blind to? That's really what it asked me. What am I blind to that's causing me to be so comfortable? And what happens when I let those go? So in one sense, it's an exercise in self-awareness. In the other sense, it's an exercise of faithfulness. Like, could I and am I? And if I'm not, what do I need to do to be changed? Like, what do I need to do to change that without actively throwing away said thing? Does that make sense?
Hmm. Yeah. So, all right. So personalizing it, I'll be real. So like when I was in Gagetown, I was single when I lived there and I was the pastor there. One of the things I got into the habit of doing was like every morning I'd, get up, breakfast, coffee, go to the office at the church and sit down, spend time doing my devotional, spend time praying. Like every day, like that was the thing. And I had like these routines built into my life. And then I got married and I moved. And like I realized that a lot of that I had done honestly because it was a bit convenient. Like the only thing it really cost me was just making sure I did it every day. But like then when I got married, like I had to purposefully structure time to do it. And I got to be honest, like I still wrestle to do it if I'm just going to be totally open about it. Like that's revealing and that's something that I wrestle with. And it's like, so was that actually real? Is that actually real if when it's no longer convenient, when it's no longer comfortable, if I just don't do it?
And you're asking about the discipline specifically, like how
Yeah, I mean,
much.
like that. Yeah, that's a discipline, but I mean, that's part of what the question is.
No, you're right. It's fair. Yeah, it is personal
Yeah,
too. So I guess I shouldn't. I'm just trying to make sure I'm tracking with you 100%.
yeah, yeah. Or like another instance is, um, sort of what you mentioned. I know some people, are like this. They go to the church. They go to the same church with their family. So like they show up. Their friends are there. Their family's there. What if they had to move somewhere else where you didn't have family or friends? Like, would you still be doing those things, like still meeting regularly with other believers? Would you still be going to worship service or would you just stop? And I got to be honest, this is actually something that research is showing. This is one of the reasons why a lot of young adults are dropping out of participation in the church is because they move from their home church, go somewhere else, they don't know anyone, and so they just don't do it. And I think that's actually a reflection of this question, like, are you just involved in spiritual disciplines? Are you just involved in worshiping God just out of habit and because it's comfortable? What if all of a sudden it became uncomfortable to do those things? So were you really righteous anyways? Sort of,
Yeah.
so to speak. Like
No,
were you
it's
only like were you only like that because it was convenient? And actually, I mean, geez, that's so interesting now that I'm thinking about it in light of that, because that's one thing that I always keep an eye on because I work with young adults and I do young adult ministry. And so that's something a lot that we see. Like students go through, like they grow up in the church, they're in children's ministry, they're in youth ministry, like even highly active people who are like youth leaders. Then they graduate from high school, they move off, they go to college, even if it's a Christian college, and then suddenly they're just not involved in church anymore. And it's like,
Can I ask an interesting question?
yes,
Okay. Do you think then it is a bad thing for us to make church more convenient?
actually, yes.
Interesting.
I would. So I'm sorry. If you were going to make a point on that, go ahead.
No,
But I
no,
always
no. I
know
just
you.
wanted to hear what you had to say. I
Yeah.
think I agree. I think I agree. I know it's really college hipster, but it is what it is, man. Like, I think I think the older I get, the more I realize that I have more to give, and I want to give that more, and I want a space where I can give it. And I see a lot of what my frustration is with my own faith and other people's faith is the lack of like what's required of me, like the lack of challenge to do those things. Does that
Hmm.
make sense? So like
Yeah.
when I ask that question, it's because I wrestle with that question. So no, I don't have a
Mhm.
point to make, and no, I'm not like, oh, Ben, you're wrong. Yeah, it's not like that. It's not like that at all, man. Like, yeah. Anyway,
Right.
I want to hear what you guys said though.
Yeah. So when I was in college, I was in a class. It was actually evangelism, and my professor was talking about a church he was in where it was a new church plant, and so every Sunday they met in a school gymnasium, and so they had to take time before and after the service, setting up, taking down the chairs, the speakers, all of that. He said it was actually really uncomfortable, but eventually we got our own church building, and he said almost immediately the whole spirit of the community changed and people just became less involved because now instead of actually having to be in a place that's uncomfortable where the acoustics of the sound aren't that great, where the seats aren't, they're not padded, they're just metal folding chairs, but now they're in a sanctuary where the pews are all nice and padded, it's a nice comfortable temperature, the acoustics are set just right. He's like, they're just, it didn't cost anything. So therefore it actually lost its value to people. Like people just
Mm.
weren't interested anymore. And that always stuck with me. And then I remembered when I was, again, a pastor in Gagetown, the church was set up in a pretty weird way just because of, over the years, different remodeling took place. Like when you walk in the door, the first thing that's in front of you is a set of stairs. At the top of that stairs is the door to the sanctuary. And honestly, it's an uncomfortable space on Sunday morning because there's just a lot of people there. It's like you have to work around people. You got to go around them to get to the hangars and stuff. It's uncomfortable. But I remembered when I was a pastor, like I actually loved that. I was like, I love that the first thing that happens when you come in the door is that it's not a totally comfortable place. And I feel like that actually gave it more value because to actually go to church there and even to be a visitor there, like it actually costs something. Like it did cost a certain level of comfort. And even for me, like I was uncomfortable there too. Like I felt awkward standing there and I'm an introvert. So being around all those people, sometimes it would freak me out. But that's why I appreciated it is because it did cost something.
Mm.
So yeah, I don't want to go
I
too
like these.
much on a tangent there.
I like these questions though. They're really
Yeah.
challenging, and I mean I like them, and I don't like the implications of them, but I like the questions. If that
But I
makes
think
sense.
something else with there too, and I know you and I have talked about this, and it's something that we're seeing. I wonder if this is part of the reason why young adults are actually drawn to the more liturgical forms of worship because it's not comfortable. And actually one of the things I've heard from
Well,
several
yeah,
people
yeah.
is like one of the things that they're attracted to with like Catholic services is they go in and they're like, because it's not about me. I go in and like it's not totally comfortable. I don't know everything that's going on. And there's something very attractive about that.
I had to physically stand and sit and kneel and do all these things and recite these things, and it's
Yeah.
actually a little bit of work, to be honest with you, comparatively to like literally, you can go to any Protestant service. Like no, Ben, I think you brought up a good point. I don't like to sing. I really, really don't enjoy singing and worship. I really hate it. I hate it. I'm embarrassed of my voice, which makes it worse. But more
Hmm.
so, I just don't enjoy it because I just have never felt like it's nice to listen to the music, but that's about it. So like on Sundays, sometimes I just don't sing. I just kind of sit there and just like, kind of try to be in the song in the moment, whatever, but I'm not like quote unquote participating because I just really don't enjoy it. But that's my whole point, is the fact that I can go there, not say a word during song, sit down, listen to the service, and still not say a word. And I've
Hmm.
been a quote unquote equally active participant as someone who was singing with the top of their lungs, and I can get just as much out of it. I just feel like that's weird and not okay.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm reflecting on that now. Because I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah. And I understand that, but like, and this is just the wrestle of church, right? Just
Hmm.
every of capital C church, of all churches. Like, to what extent do we make the faith more palatable so we can bring people in? And is that the say all be all? And to what extent do we challenge them to grow? And how do we accomplish both? And where is the primary way to accomplish both? I think as we talk about services on Sunday morning and liturgy, what you're really touching on is that comfort level. Wow, this is going a way different place, but it's interesting, so why not?
Yeah.
Like, we do that on Sunday mornings, and we change our quote unquote liturgy so that we can make it palatable for an outsider who's never been there and is uncomfortable in that space to be comfortable.
Hmm.
But I think you set them up with such bad expectations that now moving forward, Christianity is a comfortable exercise. So it
Hmm.
just feeds itself. It's an act of gluttony to some extent, right? Like, I know that sounds kind of, that's a bad analogy, but it is, I guess. I don't know. Like, you're
Yeah.
just creating spiritually fat people. Wow, that was really mean. I don't mean that to be, because I'm very heavy myself. So I
But
shouldn't say that.
but is it true? I mean, maybe it's mean, but is it
You
true?
you're creating spiritual consumers, and that's the act of gluttony, and unhealthy people that can't, like, we don't teach them to build the muscles of the faith.
Hmm.
I'm not talking about getting bulked and jack gym stuff. I'm talking about like the muscles of the faith that are functional, right?
Hmm.
Like,
Is
when we think, yeah,
is
yeah.
this
Sorry.
sort of a critique we had of fundamentalism actually? Like the method of evangelism or discipleship in fundamentalism is apologetics. And so apologetics is okay, this is a tangent. Let me sort of frame this. So one of the things I'm wrestling with coming up is I'm going to be doing a review of Ken Ham's books as he reflects on why young adults leave the church, what we can do to bring them back or to keep them there. And one of his conclusions, which is a very fundamentalist conclusion, is well, we just need to teach them apologetics. We just need to teach them the arguments for the faith, then they'll get it and they'll stay in the faith. But I feel like this is or that approach is actually sort of the problem that you're highlighting, because just teaching someone apologetics doesn't actually help them wrestle with the faith. It's the whole analogy of give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man the fish, feed him for a lifetime. Teaching apologetics as a form of discipleship is just giving a man a fish. You're not actually teaching them to wrestle with anything. You're just giving them prescripted answers and saying,
Oh,
"Well,
yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
good
Okay,
enough.
I get you.
That's all you need." Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it took a while to build up to
No, I
my
get you
actual
now, though. I get
point.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think, okay, so this is, you're right in the sense that like they both, I think there's a spiritual underlying truth to both of them, and a spiritual like ailment that we would want to remedy, so to speak.
Mm,
I would argue with the fundamentalists, like the problem comes with the fact that they just assume that all truth is proposition, so like it
yeah.
can be fixed by right belief, versus like this is more of an internal question. But I think the deeper question is, the tie that you're getting at is important, but what we're talking about is comfort level, in terms of like, are we spoon feeding people into like inability to do this? I would
Mm,
say that their theology unintentionally, but consequently, does spoon feed people. The only work is believing harder, but that doesn't teach them to have the
yeah.
skills that you're talking
Well,
about to wrestle with those
yeah,
things,
it's
which
not
is the
yeah,
point.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I see the tie. I see the tie. I get you. I get you. That's an interesting tie, actually. I never really would have thought of it because I was really critiquing more of like your modern church style, like fad. Basically what's
Yeah.
going on. Um, I like the pop culture Christian level.
But isn't that what it is? It's like Christianity made easy.
But
Like it's
fundamentalism
just
or
the modern fad. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. It's like,
Like
hey. You know,
if we ever give an answer to something, it's going to be something that's easy and palatable, and you don't actually have to wrestle with it or do
yeah,
any reflection. No conversation really involved.
yeah.
I mean,
It
like, but
really
this is
bothers me that Stephen Furtick wears designer jeans and designer shoes. Like really bothers me at my core.
yeah,
Like, sorry, it just makes me mad.
that's okay
And we
because
look at him
it
as like
like
a
it
moral example or something.
yeah. And maybe it's not that he does that that's bad. It's the fact that it sends a theological message. Like, I'm sorry, if you're a pastor, everything you do is communicating theology. It's the nature of the job. It just is.
Can I ask you a different question, Ben?
Yes.
As a Christian person, just in general, to some extent,
Mhm.
don't you bear some of that same responsibility? It's just not for guiding a flock and telling them what's acceptable, but now you are
Mhm.
doing so to the world. Full stop.
Yes, and actually that's something I was reflecting on not long ago. I think it was yesterday. I was watching a video by a guy and he was talking about modesty. Um,
Hmm.
and it was just a really interesting video, not directly
Modesty is
related to this.
honesty.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But it just made me think, and it's like, you know what? There is a point to when Paul was talking about, like, don't wear jewelry, don't wear all this fancy stuff in church. And I know, like, we sort of him haul around this like, yeah, it's no big deal, come as you are type thing. But you're right, like that communicates something. Like when people do that. And I think maybe that's worth reflecting on. Like, how do we actually present ourselves
Yeah, it's a good question.
around others? And it's yeah, I think that's worth it. I
Yeah.
mean, whether you're, rich or poor, how do we present ourselves around other people, right? Because it can fall on both sides. So, like getting back to the Job question, I find this question to be pretty interesting. Is someone righteous because they're comfortable? So the first question that was asked is, are people righteous because they're prosperous? But one of the interesting things about that is that someone could be prosperous or poor and still be righteous. Their benefit from righteousness doesn't necessarily aid in that. And it doesn't really matter if they're prosperous or not. It's not like, but this question is different because it almost assumes that are people righteous only because they're comfortable? It seems like where we're going is actually it's wrong to be righteous because you're comfortable,
Yeah.
or that being comfortable is antithetical to being righteous, which is different than being prosperous. Like you could be prosperous and be righteous. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well,
But it seems like there's something wrong with being comfortable and being righteous.
do you
But I know I'm wording that very poorly. I hope you know what I'm trying to ask though.
so this is okay, so I don't know that I can say that that is exactly what Job is trying to communicate. What I think he's trying to say is that that's the sole reason that you remain faithful and you're righteous.
Yeah.
That's not okay.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, which
Sorry.
is a nice blowback into my face of all the passive critiques, not passive, just critiques that I've sorry that I just offered, not only about churches and culture and stuff, but like you know that maybe God's work can still be accomplished, and it's up to Him ultimately to decide, what's going on in people's hearts, and that
Hmm.
feels so. I hate saying that. I hate it. Does that just feel disgusting to say? You know what I mean? Like, but
Yeah.
that's maybe just my own sense of like self righteousness, or my own sense of benefit that I know more about you. But that's a different sense. So we'll find another book to talk about that. But,
Hmm.
but like I'm just passing judgment as if I have some kind of secret knowledge of God. But like maybe that's what we're getting at is that like it's that level of comfort, and maybe my level of comfort is my own self created comfort of like I know more, haha,
Hmm. Yeah, because that
like
could be a
when
problem too, right? Like, what was I reading the other day? And someone made a point of saying, like, I'm sure it's a quote out there. Like, when you think you know something, you're you're prohibiting yourself from actually learning about it more, or from
yep.
like getting more understanding, something like that. I don't know.
I agree.
Well, even
That makes
even
sense.
before the show, like I sort of mentioned something like that to you, which I've been reflecting on how do I approach the scriptures. And I was like, I feel like I've tended to unintentionally have gotten to this place where I feel like there is one interpretation of the scriptures, and so like I have to do the work to figure out what that is. And once you find it out, then okay, then that's the meaning of the text.
Boom,
But a
it's
lot of
done. You know,
yeah, but a lot of parts of scripture are multivalent. Like there's multiple layers of meaning, and it's not just one. I mean, obviously some are more accurate than others, but two things two interpretations can be true at the same time, and that's not a problem.
That's for the record to anybody who just got fired up. That's not like some advocation for pluralism.
No.
I mean, it's just acknowledging the reality that like we bring some stuff into the text and maybe understand it differently, or that maybe the text was trying to get at multiple things and is okay with you understanding it different ways.
Yeah. So, like, for
So
example, one of the texts I referenced when I
yeah,
was talking to Jordan before the show was when Jesus feeds the 5,000, right? And he breaks the
Mhm.
bread, gives thanks to the multitude. And I said, there's two ways to interpret that, and both are equally valid. One, you could interpret it as here's a miracle that Jesus is performing in order to meet the physical needs of these people. And that is a very good thing. Jesus is actually taking care of them. And it also shows, his power over the material world. On the other hand, it's actually a very interesting image of what the Eucharist is about. Well, both of those meanings are true, and you could interpret the text in both of those ways. They don't conflict with each other, but yeah, just that. Like there's te- scripture is multivalent, right? Obviously, you could go like the heretical route and interpret scriptures totally wrong. I'm not saying all interpretations are valid. I'm just saying that going with the idea that
it's
each
not
verse
say
only
it's
has
not
one
one.
meaning,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's not a
is
zero sum game. It's not all or
yeah.
nothing.
is a mistake that I've noticed I've been unintentionally making. I just didn't realize I was thinking that way. So,
Mm,
anyways,
that's good. That's
yeah.
interesting stuff. Well, Ben, is there anything else you want to add to our comfortable conversation in Job? Any other thoughts?
I don't think so. I mean, it's opened the door. I'm going to be thinking about this a lot, I'm
I
sure.
know.
But
But for our
yeah,
listeners this week, that's some stuff to chew on.
yes. Yeah, it is. It really is.
Yeah. Is your faith tied too deeply? Is it tethered and anchored too deeply to either prosperity and or comfort? And do you think that it could do that? And if so, what changes do you need to make in your own faithfulness in order to actually draw that? So uh chew on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So next time, which we might take a 2-week break on this. So apologies ahead of time, just life situations. Um, Jordan's going to be gone. I'm about to have a baby. So that's going to be crazy.
So Ben has a real excuse. I'm on vacation. So
Yeah. But when we come back, we're going to be going into the dialogues where Job and his friends actually wrestle with these same questions that we were talking about. They go some pretty crazy directions. It's really interesting. That's going to be the real meat of Job. And so that's what we're going to do next time, because there are a couple other issues that are raised, a couple other questions that are asked along the way that are pretty powerful and actually pretty surprising, some of the questions that are asked and some of the claims that are made. But that's in Job. So we'll do that next time. Thanks for joining us. If you like this, leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, and really, we like just leave a comment. Really, like subscribe or not. I mean, that's nice if it happens, but really, we just like hearing from you guys.
yeah, it's kind of nice. If you want, if you're daring, share one of the ways that you maybe have tethered your faith to comfort or
Mm,
prosperity,
yeah,
or don't.
yeah, that's up to you. Anyways,
Yeah.
yeah. So take care, everyone, and we will see you next time.